Hello, everyone. Hi, guys. So welcome to the first of many Cercle W Hotels talks here at the W. We're going to kick off with a really important topic in our industry called mental health. So we're talking about clarity in chaos, mental health in the electronic music ecosystem. We've got three amazing guests who we'll get to introduce in a minute. I'm Frank, one of your co-hosts. I'm a documentary maker and a journalist, and I'm here with the lovely Sarah Story.
My name's Sarah. I am a DJ and a broadcaster. I work at Radio 1. Okay, so guys, introduce yourselves, please.
Hello, I'm Annie. I am the head of events for London-based record labels Anjuna Beats and Anjuna Deep, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you very much, Cercle and W, for having us.
Hi, I'm Dave De Valera, artist manager, owner of marketing agency and management company based out of Lisbon, Portugal, originally Irish. And here we are.
Hi, I'm Louisa, the chaos of clarity in chaos. And I'm an artist and a performer, and I have a record label called RAR and a podcast called Sober Sex, and I try and be an advocate for mental health and recovery in the music industry.
Okay, thank you. All right, Annie, let's get straight into it then. So can you share a couple of the most fulfilling and the most challenging aspects in your work?
Yeah, so I think the greatest privilege of doing what I do is that Anjuna Beats and Anjuna Deep as a touring brand is active on every continent, which means I have these amazing friendships and collaborators in all different corners of the world. And there's something that's like deeply connecting about that. Of course, the tax to pay on that is that it's all consuming. It's, 9 to 5, to 6, 7, 8 o'clock Monday to Friday in the office. And then it's the weekend shows and traveling and changing time zones and all of the rest of it. It's the works. We do it because we love it, but it's definitely challenging then to make time for the other things or to maintain healthy relationships outside of the dance music bubble. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely there's a price to pay for all of the good parts.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into that a little bit later on, because that is a massive thing, I think, in this industry, is trying to balance and see family and have relationships and things like that. Frank, do you want to go to the next question?
Sure. I mean, David, what about you? Like, what kind of things do you absolutely adore about the work that you do? And maybe share with us a couple of challenges as well.
Sure. Well, I guess it starts with my passion for music and the industry and the scene in general. And, a lot of elements of what I do they're very rewarding because I'm working in my passion and working with people that are like-minded. And I think those types of connections are some of the best that I have in my world. And yeah, similar to Annie, I have 2 businesses in 3 different countries with quite a large team, and managing artists, traveling the world, keeping on top of business affairs and, working with your staff. And it's kind of difficult to be on tour for 3 or 4 days and then have to be in the office at 9 a.m. managing the rest of what goes on, week to week. And yeah, it can be quite 24/7. It is 24/7. It can't be quite. Especially like leading up to events like this, which afterwards it's very rewarding to, do something like this, meet all these beautiful people. And, but it does come with a payoff, and that's the balance. That's the challenge for me to, I guess, navigate that and keep myself sane, but also reach the goals and do all the things that I want to do in business.
Nice. What about you, Louisa? Talk to us about some of the amazing stuff that you've done as an artist and the only artist on this panel, actually, being a bit cornered here. But talk to us about those amazing experiences that you have, and then tell us a little bit about what is tough to navigate.
I think a lot of the challenges have been mentioned, and a lot of the wonderful things about, having a community and being able to travel the world with people that you love and admire, and, do what you're passionate about is truly a gift. And with that gift comes often great responsibility and many burdens. And I think one of the things I really love about this work is being able to kind of try and speak truth to power, or let this work be a platform for advocating in a positive direction. And then some of the more challenging stuff is having self-worth really linked to kind of follower numbers or tour dates, and trying to find kind of metrics of success that are not necessarily controlled by external factors can be very challenging. And so kind of having to do the internal work of being able to find value in what we do, we artists, or perhaps everybody on this panel, in this room, outside of that, which is kind of controlled by the market, so that when I'm not playing as much, or when somebody else has, more followers than me, that my ego isn't so attached that I feel terrible about myself.
Yeah, I hear you. And could you share maybe with us, Louisa, some of the maybe the difficult moments that you experienced sort of early on in your career, and how you overcame them, and what led you to what you're doing now?
I think earlier on it was really a scary moment when I felt like I was at like kind of peak power career-wise, getting like a magazine cover and having a lot of tour dates, and internally it felt horrible. Like it was one of the more depressing moments of my life, and I thought that external success would somehow heal me, and alas, that's not what happened. So kind of having to take a closer look at my own mental health and what I was basing my perceived self-worth on, and addressing that, not necessarily through work, but through kind of deep internal work. And also this idea that, as I think post-COVID for a lot of us, the industry has changed a lot, and it's been kind of challenging to find footholds in this new landscape. And so having to reassess my relationship with how I want to place myself within this, because if I'm going on the road and finding, and I'm sure you guys can relate, if we're doing this work and we're not sure what makes it meaningful, that can be really heartbreaking, especially if we grew up and this is the dream. You're doing the thing that you want to be doing more than anything on earth, and it doesn't feel right. When
it feels like your purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not rewarding.
Totally, precisely.
I've been there a few times, where on paper everything is going great, but you're like stressed out, I'm unhappy, but this is what I want to be doing, and navigating that is challenging. And it's, for me as well, it's about self-worth.
Yeah.
It's a challenge that I definitely have in my personal life and all aspects, and navigating that can be tricky.
Yeah, and I think the should of I should feel grateful, I'm getting everything I thought I wanted.
How dare you?
How dare you not be thrilled about this on social media?
David, tell us about the early days of your career in the industry. Tell kind of the day-to-day things that you were experiencing, and how it's impacted you.
Sure. So I started as a DJ and producer when I was 15, and I was super young, kind of thrown into clubs and that whole lifestyle at a young age. Definitely in the first couple of years, there was some eye-opening moments of how it all worked compared to the perception that I had before I went into it. And I think, there's a couple of challenges in that initial stage. It's first of all, being an artist, I'm sure it's quite a lonely affair. You're in the studio on your own, you're DJing on your own. It's all, alone. And you kind of have to initially, you're building up your skill set behind the scenes in your bedroom, in the studio. But then there comes a point where you want to, create a career for yourself, or start to create a career. And it's, how do I start that career? And for me, looking from the outside in, it was very much many different cliques in Dublin where I was growing up. And how can I break into these cliques to then start my career? And for me, in the early stages, these cliques were, guys that were 10, 12, 13 years older than me. A little bit hard to connect with those people. You're trying to hustle and work your way in and speak to people. And I think for me, in the first 5 to 6 years, there was a lot of rejection. And that's definitely hard for anyone to deal with. But I think it's even harder when your passion is so strong of what you're trying to do. And you're just getting the door closed, 99.9% of the time. You're dealing with, let's face it, electronic music 25 years ago compared to now was definitely a more amateur scene. And just the pressure of trying to get into that as a young person, I think, is quite hard. And then, of course, there's the navigation of, when you get into the scene. The most frustrating thing for me was actually being in the studio. It was never the way I wanted it to be, or it was never this, it was never that. And I always found a way to, become anxious about it or avoid it or whatever it was. And then I guess from there, when you start to build a career for yourself, there's no money involved. You're working for free. You're chasing someone for €50 for a gig that you did last Saturday night. All of these different elements, come into it and create pressure and stress. And, for me in my early 20s, it was extremely difficult to deal with, because all the way through school, from age 13, when I first got my hands on a set of Technics, I was like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do anything else. I'm sitting in English class dreaming about being a DJ. And I guess when you're so wrapped up in that and you're not getting where you want to go or even getting anywhere, that's stressful. And for me, it was financial, it was personal, it was a lot of different difficult times. But it's about perseverance, I guess, in that space. And it doesn't happen overnight for everyone. For some people it does. Everyone's journey is different. I hear a lot of people artists in particular, talking about, oh, this person's doing this. So what? I mean, everyone's journey is different in any walk of life or business or artistry or whatever it is. And yeah, there was definitely a lot of anxiety in my early 20s. And I think that's when, around 25, 26, started to become more conscious of my mental health and started to look away from the external factors and start trying to go inside and figure things out from there. And I guess I've been navigating it like that for the last 25 years. I'm still here.
Tell us a bit about how you went from being an artist to then moving into management. When did that happen?
Sure. So I was a DJ and producer. I was just talking to Dave Clark about it a second ago in a club called The Pod in Dublin. And I think that was when my first proper break in music started. I was a resident there, week in, week out. You had the biggest artists in the world. And then I started promoting events, because just DJ fees at the time, what I was doing, it just wasn't enough to live a life. Mm-hmm. I was also working a day job where I could here and there and juggling all of that. And then I was a promoter, kind of from mid-20s till I was 31. And went through the 2008 crash and events in Ireland, not the biggest market in the world for electronic music. It all went down the pan pretty much. Clubs were closing left, right and centre, and I had to think about what my next moves were. And at that stage, I still had the same level of passion and energy for music. But the closer you get to 30, you're like, okay, I want to buy a house, I want to buy a car, I want to do all these things that society does. And then I kind of changed my direction a little bit, started a marketing company called Circulate. My business partner is sitting right there. And started managing artists very soon after, because my passion just wasn't for the artistry around music and being in the studio. I actually found the studio work quite boring, because I could never get the result that I had in here. The vision wouldn't come to reality. And I was interested in the business side of it. I had not the same passion, but similar. And over the last years, my passion actually has leveled up to my original feeling for the music. And from there, started building things on the business side.
And in terms of, you've mentioned about you want to try to understand people a bit more. You've gone from being the artist yourself to now being a manager. And you kind of want did you start studying psychology, or did you really start looking into that?
No, I haven't studied psychology, but I'm definitely interested in, managing people and their behaviors and helping them realize their dreams or their goals or getting them to a place. Because I think artists, any of the ones I've worked with, I'd say 90%. There's similar behaviors that come through, and sometimes these behaviors, they start to sabotage what it is that they're trying to do, whether it's release music or do something else on touring or whatever it is in their business. And I really enjoy working with people because, managing an artist it's a relationship, I speak to my artists more than I speak to anyone else. And understanding, where they're at with their own mental health, because, we were talking earlier about, workload and traveling and balancing it all. The artist's life, depending on what level you're at, but say you're a full-time touring artist doing 10 to 12 shows a month, the travel takes a lot out of you. It's definitely hard. But nowadays, you got to have your marketing on point. You got to have your social media down. You got to have the personality. There's so many different verticals that people need to think about now. And it's not the case for everyone. But I think there's so many different areas. And any of the artists I work with, they're amazing in the studio. Or they're amazing at the marketing or whatever element it is. And I find it quite interesting to help them navigate that space and get to where they want to be with, relative ease. Because I find artists, not every artist, I don't want to, be too generic on it, but I find that, any of the artists I've worked with in the past, not all, they tend to go to a negative headspace quite a lot, whether it's over touring, whether it's they're partying too much or whatever it is. This kind of navigation to help them get to where they want to be, but also be human about it and guide them in a way that can impact their mental health in a lesser way.
We'll talk a little bit about how you do that with your artists, but I'm interested about the point where you said there about the various behaviors that the artists you work with might have, and obviously it comes from how they're feeling, but how does their behavior affect you in your job as a manager? Mm-hmm. How does the way they feel affect the way you feel?
Mm-hmm. Well, the classic one that comes up all the time is one day you're talking about something and then they basically disappear for 2 or 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And when you're kind of sitting in the background going, am I getting fired today, or is there a problem? Have I done something wrong? And then 3 weeks later they come back and say, hey man, what's going on? Everything good? And you're like, where the fuck have you been for the last 3 weeks? And that, for me, in some instances with certain artists, self-doubt starts to kick in. You're starting to question the things that you're doing for them. It's a lot of overthinking. And, for me, that comes up, but for me, it's more about kind of taking a step back for myself and saying, like, no, you're working hard for these people. You're doing the right things. You sit down, you analyze it, and you go, actually, no, this is on them. And for me in that space, then with them, it's figuring out, when to push, when to pull, when to leave them alone. And that's what I find most interesting. And with experience, you tend to figure out, when your artist needs to be pushed or not. And I guess that's it.
And Annie, you didn't start in dance music, electronic music. You started in pop music as a manager. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your experiences in that industry that then drew you to to come to this one on the other side of the fence?
Yeah, well, it certainly took me a while to get there through selling merch at shows and driving vans and playing in bands. And eventually I landed my first proper job at an artist management company where I managed or did the day-to-day management for a very young artist. And reflecting back on it this last week, I was also very young to be managing an artist signed to a major label. And the pressure to seize the moment of like your career is breaking, both on just the management side and the artist side, is really indescribable. I really had these sort of like older like major label dudes calling me up and being like, this is it, your life's gonna change forever, we're making money, baby. And like it was like, oh, okay, but I'm like sat backstage like mopping up tears before the showtime. And that it was very, very like the juxtaposition between what they were saying and what I was experiencing with this artist was pretty shocking, I suppose. But it was also my first job, so I just sort of thought, this is it.
Showbiz, baby.
It's showbiz, baby. So yeah, I ultimately, she decided to take a break and go to school, which was great, except for I needed a job. And I basically as a stopgap, took some temporary work as a maternity cover for an artist I'd never heard of before called Above and Beyond. And what I found there was this like amazing community. I found that the whole culture around dance music, something I hadn't really been involved in previously, was much more about the music, actually, and like throwing really good events for the music's fans, and everything was a little bit more focused on these sort of moments of really like music experiences. So my days weren't so full anymore of sort of like 8-hour stylist sessions and fittings for some like magazine photo shoot. Is really about like, how do we make the best event for fans?
Styling the stage.
The more
club.
lasers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really fell in love with it, and I've now been with Above and Beyond and Anjuna Beats and Anjuna Deep for almost 6 years. So needless to say, I'm very much in the world now, and fortunately, that artist is still making music at their own pace, and we keep in touch. So I think, like the real takeaway from that really sort of early experience in my career, sort of, it was a really good early lesson that it's okay to take a break, and you can come off the treadmill and recalibrate things so that your career works for you as a priority instead of the other way around. So I'm really, grateful to that experience and to that artist for that early lesson.
Okay, this is a question for all of you. We'll go to Louisa first. How much pressure do you feel now, or did you feel, to say yes to everything? Because in this world, it's kind of like you're self-employed and you're working for yourself. How much pressure, and how do you deal with having to say yes to things, or are you good at turning things down now?
Great question. I think at the beginning of my career, and probably for many of us, like it felt like such a gift to be asked that the stakes felt very high to say yes. Like it felt absolutely unthinkable to say no, even if, like relationships were falling apart, sleep was like non-existent, the body was kind of being like, no. Mm-hmm. And now, I've been doing this for 18, 19 years. It feels very different just because I feel like the stakes are different. I have built something that I feel is robust. And also the priorities have changed based a lot on kind of what I was saying earlier about needing to reassess the meaning of success for myself in order to survive. Mm-hmm. David was talking about something similar, this idea of like, okay, if I can't control the external factors dictating success, then maybe that can't be success for me. Mm-hmm. Because like it's out of my hands, Yeah. So today I try and say yes to things that, like, I've been doing a lot of work on kind of somatic experiencing and being able to feel a yes in my body, of like, what does that feel like versus a no. And I feel like a yes is kind of like, for myself, is like effervescent, like fireworks, like yes. And then if it's a no, it's kind of like cinder blocks slamming against each other. And there's like kind of gradients in between, but I try and respect the embodied yes and no. And also to realize that like often it's not necessarily a binary. And that, like, if there are certain things that could change a no to a yes, like, for instance, more money, or different travel conditions, or, you know, things that would allow me to, like, I can ask for support, you know. And something big that's kind of happened since, for the last year or so, is that I've decided to stop taking solo DJ gigs for the most part. Like, special occasions, sure, but for the most part, I'm touring as part of a duo or a band, and that's really radically changed my experience, just because it's like, it feels exciting, it feels like an adventure. It don't have that like 6 a.m. at the airport, like close to tears
On your own.
by myself
on your
anymore.
own.
Now it's with people.
Yeah, it's easier.
And we can cry together.
Crying together.
Carrying each other along. Yeah.
And then it's fun. So that's been really helpful, is in terms of like, for me, asking myself, like, what would support look like in this scenario? What parts of this job do I love, and what parts do I find really challenging? Can I mitigate the challenge with asking for support, and what does that look like?
Okay, thank you. David, talk to me about the power of no.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what level you're at and what you're trying to do. But, you know, for me, no is one of the most powerful words. You know, going back to what you just said there about, you know, maybe not wanting to do something if you're on the fence, but saying no either creates a better situation, maybe more money, better travel, whatever it is. But I guess it's more difficult to say no when you need something, you know, when you're at the beginning of your career in whatever the industry it is. It's easy to say no when you've, you know, got money in the bank. But when you don't, it's trying to navigate that in the right way. And of course, you know, I kind of come from an ethos of, if someone asks me to do something, even if I don't know how to do it, I'll say yes and figure it out afterwards. But in more recent years, no has become a more powerful word for me and for our artists in a big way. You know, the scene has become so popular now. Everyone's clambering for everything, and, you know, thinking about your artist's mental health, saying no is really important to, you know, have, you know, a longer term career. I think this is really important, because if you don't, you're just working towards a burnout, which is not where anyone wants to be. So it's about regulating it, I think.
Yeah. Annie, tell me about the pressures that you feel to say maybe yes to anything, or are you really good at saying no now?
No, yes, no. Yeah, I am getting better. I think, something that's really stuck with me, a bit of a silly anecdote, but I was in my label boss James Grant's office doing a sort of needless Zoom call with somebody, and he sort of caught me in there, and he shared his sage words of advice. The things that you say no to are just as important as the things that you say yes to, and thinking of it that way sort of really stuck with me, is that maybe you can say thinking of it on the same level as that is intentional use of your time. So if there's something that you're saying no to, it means that you have the opportunity to say yes to something else. And so just making sure that you're being super mindful of your time is paramount, I think.
Because people love to steal your time in this industry.
Well, it's also the only commodity you have full control over.
Totally.
Is your time. There's not much. I mean, money's a bit different. So, I mean, obviously, you know, we talked about burnout. We talked about, you know, various issues. But let's try and think about the solutions. And you alluded to it, David, when you said, you know, it's easy to say no when you're at a certain stage of your career, but it's not if you're really in need of something or really want something. So for people who don't have the privilege or the possibility of saying no to something, what sort of coping mechanisms, what sort of things can we do, or what sort of things do you do personally to manage you know, your time and essentially your jobs. Maybe Louisa, you can start, and I'm going to show a little drawing that
My
you
fun
sent.
infographics.
Yeah, you just made a little infographic. Here.
Yes. Okay. So.
What the hell is this?
I'm sorry, everybody. This is so chaotic. So basically, I think a lot of the answer to your question lies in being able to regulate the nervous system kind of through the no side of the yes to no spectrum into the yes side, like so you can feel supported, even if you're doing something that you don't want to do, because like, let's face it, that's reality. Yeah. There's like, it's not very helpful if I kind of take a stance of like, there's no consent under capitalism. Like doesn't help me like live my life. So basically, I think it's been very helpful to kind of break down the difference between self-care and self-soothe. And self-care is kind of how I maintain a baseline of mental health, which for me is quite high maintenance. Like, it's not that I need a lot, it's that I kind of have to have a lot of, for myself, as somebody who is like in recovery and anxious and depressed by nature, that by kind of taking simple steps on a very regular basis, I can have a higher baseline that feels more supported. So I can go into any situation knowing that there's certain things I do almost every day, if not every day, that help me feel sane and stable and grounded, so that I don't go into a state of like panic when I have to do something I don't want to do or I don't feel prepared to do. If I find myself in a challenging situation, or if I feel like, again, I keep kind of trying to bring it back to the body, because for a long time I was really checked out of my body. Like, I had no idea of like what feeling in the body meant. So this is all news to me, perhaps for you also. So if I find myself in a kind of state of panic, or in a moment where I'm perceiving that I feel really challenged, close to meltdown, close to burnout, close to, more crying in airports, which appears to be a hobby, then I kind of have things that I can think about beforehand that are on this self-soothing side of the spectrum. So while kind of like self-care is maintaining a healthy baseline, accessing pleasure, feeling good in the body, and that looks like for me therapy, gym, going to meetings of recovery, finding ways to play, journaling, rest, meditation. Like, I'm not going to do any of those things if I'm having a panic attack, right? But in those moments, I can kind of find ways beforehand, ideally, so something to think about when you have a moment of like, what is a go-to behavior that I can help ground myself, make myself feel better, get me through this challenging situation. And that for me, there's like healthy coping mechanisms, like directly behind me, like breath work, visualization, even like reaching out for help or support in the moment, like, texting a friend and being like, I'm freaking out, can you hold space for this right now? And often like having those relationships kind of at the ready. So there's relationships obviously that we have a pre-negotiated, like, if I'm freaking out, I can call you. So it's not like, is it okay if? And then, there's like less healthy mechanisms, which I think a lot of us are also familiar with. And that for me no longer includes drinking and using, but that was definitely one of them for a while. Can be like picking at my hands, disassociating, scrolling. And if I find, often it's kind of like reverse engineered. So if I find that I'm doing those things kind of unconsciously, then I might need to kind of somehow check in and see what's going on. Like, why do I need to get out of here so bad?
Yeah.
And so just to kind of have a preconceived care plan for myself, because like no one else is going to fucking do it. Like, I have a good relationship with management agents, cool. But I think it's also, it's very empowering to be like, I have a path to feeling safe within myself no matter what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Do you find with journaling, do you think that's something to do, is it good to do because you can look back on things and go, oh, that's how I felt then and I've kind of improved since then? Do you try and do that quite a lot?
Well, I am the artist on the panel, so a lot of the journaling like gets later kind of, it can be very productive. It can be later turned into song, which is very helpful. And it can also just be like a kind of, while it can be kind of looking back and being like, wow, like things have improved, but it can also be just like a place to kind of dump what I don't want to carry with me.
Yeah.
What I don't really have space on my hard drive for,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great thing to do. Okay, David, back to you. How do you create an environment in which you can anticipate potential kind of challenges for your artists and able to kind of assist them in the right way? So if you see something's maybe going on, how do you navigate that and help your artist?
Sure. Well, I mean, I check in with my artists, weekly on a mental health side of things. A lot of the artists I'm managing are, under 25. So they're still finding their way in some aspects. And I'll just give you one example of an artist that was in August struggling a little bit, had back problems, had some stuff going on, and it was down to just not looking after himself on the road, maybe doing too many shows over the space of a month. And there was a few key things that we put in place, and kind of similar to my own routine. Some of the notes Louisa had on here are kind of similar. And I think the biggest thing for everyone is like exercise. I don't think you'll know anyone that leaves the gym in a bad mood. For me, exercise is the key thing, and diet, and just advising on that. And one of my artists at the moment wears one of these. It's called a Whoop, and it's a fitness wearable that measures your sleep, your activity, so exercise. Has a stress monitor on there, and I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate, but what it does for me and for one of my artists is it makes you more conscious of where you're at and what you need to be doing. And when you're on the road, I think diet is really important. I mean, living in airports, hotel food can be sometimes sketchy, or not eating at all for a day, or skipping meals. And I think for us as a management company, we've got all our artists signed up to Athletic Greens, so they're doing green shakes every day. We bought them Whoops, and just trying to advise and guide and help whatever way we can. And I think for me, it's just evaluating things on a week by week basis. And if I see something that crops up, we don't let it slide. We address it. We cancel shows. We do whatever we need to do to protect who we're looking after. So
what sort of things does this Whoop, other brands are available,
a garment.
what kind of things does it tell you?
So my phone is off right now for this, obviously, but it's really good on sleep. So last night I got 6.5 hours sleep, and today it's telling me that I need 9.5 hours.
Good luck.
And you've just started
Good luck with that one.
Nice.
To catch up. And then it measures your strain. So your strain could be a number of different things. Like, I love to do ice baths. I love sauna. I'm exercising probably 4 or 5 times a week. And it measures your exercise. It measures like strain that you're putting on your body, whether that be cold, heat, whatever that is. It's measuring your stress levels. And at the end of each day, it gives you a report. And it's constantly telling you, like, okay, your sleep's at 60. Like, it's telling you, where you should be. And today, I think my sleep is at 60%. Non-ADE weeks, it's between 90 and 100. And it's kind of measuring how much strain you've put on your body that day, how much sleep you need, dependent on the strain that you've put on your body. It's showing you your stress throughout the day, and they send you a report every day. And yesterday I was in the high level for 23 minutes, which wasn't that bad, considering everything that's going on. So yeah, I'm not looking at it, I mean, like, oh, this is like, gospel. But what it does, it makes me conscious about my sleep. It makes me conscious about going to the gym, and doing all these things just helps regulate, yourself. And I think this is, for me, the biggest challenge, and I can see it for artists as well. It's a very up and down, lifestyle that you have. You go from being, playing to tens of thousands of people, being told how great you are, and you're this, that, and then all of a sudden on a Tuesday, you're sitting in your house on your own, and you're like, okay, now what? And I know for a fact that there is a lot of artists, not all, but there is a lot of artists out there struggling with that. And I think for me, it's about regulation and helping the artists navigate that for themselves, and giving them the tools and the resource to do that for themselves.
Annie, obviously live events for Anjuna, you do a lot of traveling, you work in a lot of venues. You don't just manage a team of staff who work for Anjuna, you also manage a lot of external people everywhere you go. How do you create that environment where, you know, everyone is comfortable and you're in a position where you can just make sure that, you know, the vibe is as good as it can be, considering there are so many external factors? You're not just looking after one artist or like Louisa, actually, you know, focused fully on yourself. You have to manage, obviously not in that way, Louisa. I'm not throwing you under the bus. Just thinking about yourself. No, that's not what I meant. But you know, how do you manage all of that? How do you create that work environment?
Yeah, well, I think I'm a really big believer that the vibe that you create behind the scenes feeds into the dance floor. So really, my job sort of starts in the office, in our team. I have a really strong emphasis on collaboration. I feel like we have quite like an open dialogue in our team, and we do check-ins. I've got them all here as well, which is lovely.
Hey, shout out.
I think we're just like we're in constant communication about our sort of well-being as well as work, and we lean in when we have more space to take work off each other's hands, or we can rotate different shows, for example, so that we're not constantly always all together working at the same time, because that's not always the most effective use of our energy. So I think it really starts there. Obviously, to be able to motivate a team, you have to start with yourself and make sure that your own house is clean. So I do try to I have a very strong routine. I try to get to as much yoga as possible. I try to have a healthy lifestyle, and so that I can approach challenging situations with a sense of calm. And then I think also, you know, the music that we work with is very emotive, especially on the trance side and above and beyond. The message is really to fans that we're here all in this together, and that music is this uniting force. So I think we're starting from a strong space anyway, but then making sure that all of our third-party partners buy into that message is the challenge. So we do that in a couple of ways. We have a harm reduction and safe accessibility and sustainability rider that we send out with every show contract, which probably very few people have time to read. So we make sure that it's sort of reintroduced when we get to a show. Either myself or somebody from my team is generally present for security briefings, where we can make sure that the most friendly, happy face is at the barricade, so that there are safe people to speak to our fans. And if they're not, our fans tell us as well. We get a lot of feedback from them. So we have to put our best foot forward always. And there's a few other things to do with that, but I think because we are very vocal as a company about our morals and our values, that message is delivered to anybody who comes on: production managers, tour managers, other artists who sign to the label. There's certain things in all of our contracts that make sure that everybody in our orbit is sort of bought into this message. And I think, that really does make for really great party atmospheres where it feels safe. And I also think we have the opportunity to change other venues or inspire our partners in different parts of the world to sort of up the ante on what they're doing. So there's a London club I'm speaking to specifically about introducing greeters at the door. So instead of just having security and just having stewards, you actually just have a friendly face who's sort of got no agenda. It's just like, hey, this line's going to take another 20 minutes, but like it's going to be a good time in there. And if you need anything, let me know. So I think being able to use our brand and really impact change in other spaces is something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, brilliant.
Cool.
And Louisa, can you tell me a bit more about some of the work that you do outside? of music? Because you're a podcaster and you do the 12-step recovery program. You like help people through that, right?
Yeah, totally. And presently kind of going through consent educator training, which applies not only to kind of the Me Too sexual space, but more, I think, along the lines of what we were talking about burnout, around kind of like, what is a yes to no spectrum? How do I feel it in my body? And how do I carry that as like fluently into all areas of my life? Because, you know, as we were saying, like, having a no makes yes meaningful, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, I was fortunate enough to get sober when I was really young. I was 20, so it was kind of before a lot of career success, although I was already in club spaces and DJing and very adamant about my need to DJ as a sober person, even though everybody in my life was like, what are you doing? And so for me, it's really important to kind of have that attitude of trying to be of service and of using this platform as a way to show that it's possible to do this work clean and sober and have a really good life.
Yeah.
It's really meaningful to me. It's like, that is my primary purpose. So, I mean, I think it does have a lot to do with the, you know, mental health side, because often like addiction or alcoholism and mental health are deeply entwined, and we all work in an industry, you know, that we're in a lot of cases selling alcohol to everybody who shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we kind of, or I guess for me, like, how do I carry recovery with me to whoever might need that message, just to say that, like, life doesn't have to suck when you get sober.
What's it like performing sober?
A great time.
Because for me personally, I have a sober rider and then I have an alcoholic rider, and I can happily DJ now because I'm confident at doing it now. When I first started, I felt like I had to have a drink, even not like lots of them, but just like a drink just to kind of chill me out.
The mood, yeah.
And then I heard, I think it was Patrick Toppin, he said, DJing sober actually has totally changed me and the experience of DJing. I feel like I can connect more with the crowd. And I like doing it now. But when I tell people I've got the sober rider and I'm having sparkling water, my friends are like, what? So how have you found it over the years, DJing sober, and kind of the reactions that you're getting and your experience?
I mean, again, like, for me, this is kind of my primary purpose. This is a spearhead with which I enter a situation, but for my own well-being, because like I was not a cute drug addict. I was like a demon, and so, you know, it's very important for me to protect that. And like, what somebody's response to my recovery or my sobriety, they don't have to know I'm in recovery. They just have to know I'm not drinking or using tonight. Like, tells me everything I need to know about them, right? Like, this one thing about me tells me everything I need to know about them. And like, at this point, you know, it's been 17 and a half years. It's like, who's counting? But you know, at the beginning, it was really important for me to kind of take the time to learn how to do that before kind of entering high stakes environments again. And I would recommend anybody who's like trying to get sober, like, it's okay to take some time off, you know, like, it takes a moment for the brain and the body to recalibrate to like feeling feelings, to being in social environments, to being in high energy environments like nightclubs. You know, all that stuff is challenging at first, and like on the other side, it's like, it's really liberating, it's really fun, and there's a lot of contact, like you were saying. Like, I like to be present, I like to feel connected, and like, I wouldn't want to miss it, you know?
Yeah, you don't want to do a gig and you don't remember the gig. It's like, I wasn't really looking forward to that. And like, I've got friends that have done that, and I've done that in the past. I've done a few gigs where I'm like, I had too many drinks last night, and it's frustrating that you don't experience that energy that's out there.
Yeah, what a shame to miss.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm finding now that a lot of younger DJs that are coming through are sober, and I really like that, because when I first started DJing, I thought it was bizarre that the first thing they did when they greeted you would give you a bottle of vodka. Like, and when you're 18, that's fine, right? You're excited about
Job
that.
perk,
But
yeah.
you can't do that all the time, and I do find that it's quite mad, but it's nice to see that younger people are coming through and it's cool. Like, they're really cool about not drinking.
Yeah, it seems like the industry is really destigmatizing that because of conversations like this, and also just because of like what was discussed about, in order to show up for work, because again, this is, you know, a music industry panel, industry being the operative in the sense, like, you won't be able to, show up, have good sleep, train, eat well.
Yeah.
If you're just like suffering a terrible hangover from the night before, I honestly have no idea how people tour loaded, because it was so beyond my capacity to do literally anything.
Yeah.
I mean, going through an airport, with a bad hangover is torture.
Yeah. I do feel that even though social media has its downsides, I actually think that that's been a major part to play in people not drinking, because everything's on camera now, right? So you don't want to see a DJ that's absolutely leathered behind the decks, because they'll watch that back and go, so maybe okay in the moment when they're watching their content back and going, wow. So I think that's been a factor to play in the people not drinking as much.
Yeah, and I also think like post-COVID, like that's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but post-COVID, after kind of so many people who had a lot of streaming success kind of entered club spaces, like you're not getting loaded alone in your house, like performing to Twitch, or if you are, I'm available to talk, like here to be of service, but like
handing out business cards.
But I think it perhaps helped train people to like do this sober, so that when they re-entered club spaces, it's a little
and it's basically it's not about like whether you have to choose one or the other. It's like it's creating a space in which everyone can coexist, whatever the choices they make.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a choice, isn't it? There's not that pressure.
Yeah.
I feel like there was pressure
for sure
years ago to just, it's part of what you do. It's
because
right?
if everybody else is doing it,
it's like being at school, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like that pressure to do
totally
it.
peer pressure.
Yeah.
What about you, Annie? Like when you manage, events of the scale of the events that you manage, do you ever come across, situations where you almost not have to put your foot down, but you have to just make sure that the people around you are kind of not necessarily to make sure they're sober, but just to make sure that they understand the potential consequences of what they're doing. I guess you have lots of different people at lots of different stages of their career, and if I'm if I'm in my early 20s, of course I'm going to the after party, but
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a live conversation in our team. And there's definitely been, we sort of like gather sometimes and have a meal before a show to just make sure that we've eaten before being on our feet for 12 plus hours. And we sort of almost negotiate a time where it might be okay to have one beer at the final DJ set and to lean into that, or hey, we can't really, we'll pop in and say hello at the after party, but we don't need to be there. It's under control. And we have another show tomorrow or something like that. So I think having a constant conversation about what is required helps my team internally. But certainly I think a bit like cautious about what to say about this, but certainly I think it's very exciting. We have a team now of almost 100 people at our umbrella company involved group, and a lot of people are in their early 20s, and we have a lot of them here, and certainly I'm sure there's going to be a couple of sore heads each morning, but I think so long as we're sort of coming back to the purpose of what our work is here and we're able to deliver high quality work, I think that's the only message you can sort of give a young person, and hopefully a lesson is learned before it becomes either habitual or routine.
Yeah.
But we also have some policies in place. Specifically, if you're at one of your own shows, you've got to represent the brand.
Mm-hmm.
So that message usually goes out before we have a bigger event.
Yeah.
What are we sort of thinking about, going forward? And obviously we talked about some of the progress and then some what it might have been like, 25 years ago, or what it was before and maybe after COVID. So going forward, what kind of things do you think need to be done or need to be advocated for? What kind of changes potentially, or what kind of actions should we take to make the future a little bit better for those conversations? Annie, we can start with you actually.
I think just doing this, talking more, having more spaces to have these types of just having public conversations about one's own struggles. I think we could have I know there's lots of wonderful companies coming together now who are providing 360 support for artist managers and artists and people who work in the industry, and creating like very like detailed plans, whether that's for health or fitness or mental health, but having, I guess, more open sourced resources for people who might not be signed yet or might not have management yet. I think there's definitely a space or sort of a gap for the people who are just coming through, and where did they go to get this same level of very bespoke support, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. What about you, David?
Yeah, I think there's more and more awareness in the last years. But I think one thing that I, ask myself all the time is, what are the solutions here? What are the action plans? How can we take more action? Because, a voice is one thing, but what can we do as an industry to make changes, to be more aware? I personally don't know what they are, but I feel that there needs to be more of an action plan for artists and people in the industry to help overall in what's going on with people. Mm-hmm. And what that is, I don't know, being honest.
Louisa, when we spoke a week ago or so, you talked about the idea of having some kind of DJs union, or like some kind of people kind of getting together in a way that's almost kind of fighting for common purposes.
I mean,
it's
we love a
sounds,
union.
Yeah, I mean,
but I feel like in a lot of ways, our industry and the way how it spreads out both kind of economically and legally, globally, makes it very difficult to unionize, obviously. And, I think that lack of stability that we have from lack of community on both the industry side and the artist side makes it very difficult. And of course, like, one possible solution to all of these things would be to have, better payment from digital streaming platforms. And now that Bandcamp has laid off half of its employees, anyway.
It's a whole other panel.
Yeah, now for our next panel, hot takes. So I mean, I feel like, I think quite a lot about this stuff, and I know that there's so many excellent resources available, and unfortunately, they're really decentralized. And I feel like a great first step would be to make the resources that are available. Like, there's free mental health care for music industry professionals from Help Musicians in the UK, Tonic Rider in the UK, Music Cares in the US. Like, there's so many resources available, and not a lot of people are taking advantage of them because they don't know where to find them. So centralizing resources would be a major step. And I think also, in the same way that all clubs and festivals have often a health care professional on site, like an EMT or a medic, having a mental health care professional on site would be really huge because, like, people are drinking and on drugs and, like, in a highly stimulating environment. And, like, in a lot of those situations, it might, like, your friends aren't going to know what to do. So, like, wouldn't it be amazing just to have somebody who's there to be supportive in that sense? Like, easy step, maybe not easy, but huge step for just kind of, like, taking mental health seriously in club and nightlife spaces.
Mm-hmm. I was saying to Frank when we were travelling here, I used to do seasons in Ibiza. David, you might remember these people. They used to call them the Ibiza Angels, and it was a charity, and they'd just be walking around the streets, and it was kind of more in San Antonio, but they worked for the charity, and they were there just to make sure that everyone was okay on the night out, because you know what Ibiza's like, there's all sorts going on, and I feel like we need to see more stuff like that. We need to see these charities, if possible, I just thought that was an amazing thing to have these people, and I got to know them because we'd all be kind of working in the same areas and stuff, but I feel like there needs to be more things like this in clubs, at festivals maybe, something like that.
I've seen some of that at festivals before.
Have you?
Yeah, groups going around just, making sure people's well-being is okay, and, look, you go to a festival, there's someone passed out in the corner,
there's
and
a lot going on.
Everyone's just walking past these people, and they're like, unconscious drunk or whatever it is. And it'd be great to have, little groups going around just looking after people, really.
Because there's only so much security can do, right? And they're there for other things.
Totally.
They're not just there for that.
And kind of a note on that, I think that Tonic Rider in the UK is doing emergency mental health like training for anybody who wants it, as part of their initiative to kind of have people who have skills in club spaces and festival spaces. And so if you're interested in that training, helpmusicians.co.uk, I believe, or Tonic Rider.
So even something for like just staff, like just to kind of be trained, like if you were trained in first aid, basically.
Yeah, or anybody.
Yeah.
You love going to clubs? Get some emergency medical health training. Or mental health training.
There is a group in the UK, and it's led by this girl called Tasman, who wrote a book. It's called, you know her? I can't think.
Musician's Guide, the touring guide.
The touring guide.
For musicians' mental
yes,
health?
mental health touring guide for musicians, and it's a book she wrote, and she's created a group. I'll have to remember the name from my phone.
Music Industry Therapists Collective.
There you go.
Hey.
And there's like between 15 and 20 therapists on there, most of which have come from the music space. There's some artists there, there's some different people from PR companies, and I've spoken to a therapist from that group, and I found it quite good because you can relate a lot more because they're, have a better understanding of the industry that you're coming from. They know more about the different challenges that you're being presented on a day-to-day, and they're definitely a great group of people doing some great things. So, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Shall we go to questions?
Yeah.
Okay, has anyone got a question in the audience? We've got about 15 minutes to answer your questions. This always happens. Everyone's scared to put their hands up.
Phil, have you got a question?
Gentleman over there with the glasses.
Hey, Louisa. Whoa.
Hey.
I think what you touched on there about Bandcamp and stuff is actually like really, really important part of this conversation. Like, I always find that like streaming economies and income streams for artists is a conversation happening over here. Then there's like the mental health conversation happening over here. And actually they're like, in my mind, completely related. Like that is literally, you have people who may not be comfortable touring, they might be neurodivergent, or they might have like mental health issues in the past or addiction issues, but they're forced to go on the road because the recorded music has no value anymore. So like, I think those conversations need to be bridged more and maybe zoom out a little bit. And that's like, it's really great to hear you say that. This is probably too big a question to follow on from that, but like, what is the long-term solution to that? Because this isn't sustainable, right? Like we're just kind of like pretending it's fine, but ultimately the reason these conversations are happening is because the economies have disappeared for like the middle class of the electronic music artist is just gone. So like it forces people on the road more, therefore it's more competitive, and people maybe like who aren't comfortable on the road, like I said, are being forced to do so. What's the long-term impact of that? I think we're seeing that now. And also, what is the solution in your guys' mind, like all three of you? Because like this is like a real pertinent issue that's kind of, I feel like, is being under-discussed. So like when you mentioned Bandcamp, I was like, this is a great opportunity to discuss it.
Huge fan of this question. Alas, we only have 12 minutes, but I think that you're nailing it, I know that Musicians as Allied Workers in the U.S., which is like the U.S. Musicians Union, has been rallying for 1 cent per stream, which is, I think, a more than fair pressure point. But again, as was mentioned, because of the kind of global nature of the industry, it's very difficult to organize. And especially because I don't think, in the same way that the actors went on strike in the U.S. and the Screenwriting Guild did, no one wants to stop their releases for 8 months or stop their tour dates for 8 months. That's not going to happen. So collectively, I think, in the future, having that kind of point brought up earlier in the conversation could be really powerful, just because they are two conversations. They're all two large conversations, but they're definitely causational. It's more than correlation at this point. So
security, isn't it? If you don't have financial security, then you don't have mental security. You don't feel good.
For sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Same for me. I think, Declan, you hit a really good point there. And, the mid-level artist is really struggling at the moment, to break an artist, and that the kind of mid-level act are definitely struggling more than in previous times. And, when we talk about Spotify and Apple, how can we challenge these corporations, and how can we come together as an industry to create an agenda for us to get what, you know, the artists need from it. And it's a difficult task because we're, you know, up against some of the biggest corporations in the world. And I think as an industry, we need to keep campaigning for the artists, for our industry, and what's right. Because at the minute, it's not. And trying to, you know, navigate the whole streaming side of things as an artist, unless you're doing really big numbers, is a bit of a lost leader. And yeah, those challenges, again, are, you know, I think we need a voice, we need a community, we need all of these things coming, you know, in that direction, and that's going to take time. Yeah.
Is there also an issue because obviously one of the impacts of it being quite a lonely job for a DJ and producer is also maybe that sort of idea that you almost kind of made it all happen yourself in the kind of self-made person ideal, rather than like, you know, 5 people in a band making an album together and succeeding because they collaborate. Is there also a danger there that people actually aren't so open to get together and fight for something if they get to a level where they are successful and they maybe forget about the middle and the lower range artists?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely happening.
I mean, I would also say that, like, in specifically the electronic music industry, there's a lot of performative success as a result of social media.
Yeah.
And so this idea of, like, it's very vulnerable to come out and be like, I'm financially struggling, or it feels, you know, it feels very dangerous to kind of show your soft underbelly, which makes it difficult to ask for help and rally, you know, collectively for help.
Because everyone only puts the best things on Instagram, right? They have the best gig all the time. It's like, not every gig's like that. And then that has the knock-on effect on the people that follow you, who are maybe DJs as well, because it's just a bit of a circus, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
And also this idea of, like, unless I kind of perform success, then I don't stand a chance, you know? So kind of that feels like a pit of chaos. But at least to be able to kind of start that conversation of, like, as you said, the kind of mid-level and, like, middle-class, working-class DJ or electronic music artist is being, you know, snuffed out. And that feels really dangerous for, you know, the messages we contain in our music and the messages we kind of, like, that this industry is based on.
Yeah.
Annie?
Yeah, I don't have much to add on the streaming side, but I certainly, from booking lots of artists to come and play our shows, there's definitely a conversation that needs to happen around the soaring costs of touring. And obviously artists want to be able to say yes to all of the gigs in order to build their profile, but sometimes they're coming out of shows out of pocket or breaking even just to take an opportunity. And I don't have the solution to that, but it certainly feels like the added pressure it just is not a nice thing for artists, and it's a difficult thing to support.
Yeah, you think about visas, the cost of visas and breaking even and things like that. It's a lot of pressure for the artist, isn't it? Then they've all got the fees to pay as well for the managers and the agents and things like that. It's a lot for that new artist, isn't it? Trying to break through. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Any others? Oh, yeah. Over here. Here you go.
Thanks. Yeah, this one, I guess, for David, I wrote this down while I was listening to you, is do you have any, like, tips or advice for, like, a new artist manager who has to manage their artists' like mental health? I know you mentioned like a weekly check-in that you do, but anything else you can like elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I guess it's all about open conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, I find that, you know, young males, they're not comfortable talking about their mental health. You know, they're kind of avoiding it, running away from it, escaping it in any way they can. But I think it's, for me, figuring out, you know, how to connect them with them on a level where, you know, they don't feel like it's coming from a place of, you know, a lot of time, you know, my artists are like, okay, Dad, you know, last night I was going to bed, my whole crew were going off to the streets of Amsterdam. I'm like, guys, busy day tomorrow, and they're like looking at me going, yeah, whatever, and I think it's really about open communication and figuring out how you can connect with them on that level, and just being really open, and hopefully they're open back. And suggestions is something that I do a lot. It's like, what about this, what about that, what about joining this gym, or maybe getting on athletic greens, or maybe we do this. Or it's really, I think, for me in that situation, giving them as many options as possible, so they don't have to think about it too much and go, oh yeah, I like the sound of that. And then, okay, they're into gym or whatever it is. It's like, okay, this is their interest. How can I tap into this even further and help kind of develop that out for them?
Okay, cool. I was gonna actually ask the artist up here, what do you wish management would do in regards to that maybe you haven't gotten in the past?
I mean, I feel like a lot of what David is talking about is like leading by example. Because if a manager tried to tell me to do anything that they weren't willing and ready and able to do themselves, I would feel deeply infringed upon, and like, how absolutely dare you? To be fair, like, I think it's really important to empower one's artists to take care of themselves and their own mental health, and they kind of offering a suite of tools to be able to do so. And I think also the phrasing of like, is it possible? Like, it can be very helpful, just so it's not like you do this or
exactly.
Yeah, this is like it's kind of an open-ended question of like, is it possible that you're feeling really bad coming off of this tour is because like you ate only airport food and didn't sleep for 2 weeks? Is it possible? So they can kind of come to their own conclusions and adjust accordingly, and offering support in that capacity. Because like, again, and you are therefore responsible for kind of taking care of your own mental and physical well-being, because you don't want to be a hypocrite.
Yeah, I think for me on that's a good point. Like, I try not to tell. The second you tell somebody to do something, particularly creative, they're like, yeah, okay, bye. It's more about coaching them to a place where they're coming up with the solutions themselves, and you're maybe laying out some options for them, but just trying to guide them to where they want to be, or where they should be. And this is paramount.
There's a couple of things you said there, David, and I know we've only got 2 minutes and 30 seconds left, but there's a couple of words that have kept coming back, and obviously the name of this brand that has the word athletic in it, and you just said they're coaching. So is there a parallel to be drawn here between being a DJ and an artist, performing artist, and an athlete?
Totally. I mean, there's two ways you can approach this. You can be on the road every weekend drinking and using and partying away, or you can treat it like a professional athlete, and being sober is like the main piece of that puzzle. And I think there's a big difference from going on the road drinking all weekend to being sober all weekend. Your Monday, Tuesday is a lot better when you stay sober. And I think this is key.
Do you treat it that way, Sarah, as an athlete? You do though, to some extent.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I feel like now I've got the sober rider, because I only really started touring a lot, like maybe 2 years ago, and I'm trying to go to the gym. I've always been into the gym, but I'm trying to do that more and have more of a kind of routine. But it is hard, because when you bring your friends along, they treat it as a night out.
Of course.
But you're at work. So it's pick and choose in your battles, I think. And I've learned that over the last year now, because I've done those airports. Maybe haven't shed tears, but I just haven't been to sleep for a while. It's tough. It's hard. It's like, I don't want to do this because I want to enjoy the next gig. And I suppose it's just about learning what you can and can't do.
It's just not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. And I do feel like it is now. The industry is a bit of battle of the fittest, because everyone wants to do it and you're constantly performing all the time. So I think you have to be peak fitness all the time to be the best, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
What a great way to finish. on that note. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louisa, David, Annie.
Thank you.
Mic's off.
So cute for the camera to be on. We good?
We good?